So we are recording this meeting. I hope everybody's okay with that. If you're not, if you put a note in the chat. I'll remind you again when we have questions later on in case anybody's asking a question and they don't want to be recorded. So we're here tonight in solidarity with people across the globe that are continuing the fight against fracking. We've had good news in the UK in the last couple of weeks, which I just wanted to mention. The Isle of Wight have just had an application for oil drilling refused with a unanimous vote by their council, which is fantastic. And in Nottinghamshire, closer to home, the county council turned down a renewal application from iGas to renew their fracking activities. So that's really good news. That's at Misson in Nottinghamshire. So to all the people involved in that campaign, I just wanted to say that's a really big win. That site will be restored now to what it was before. But it's important to remember that across the globe, there are lots of communities that are still being devastated by fracking. So we've got 4 great speakers here tonight. We're going to hear from them in a minute. Just before we start, just a reminder to rename yourselves, make sure your mic is muted. We're going to have questions after we've heard from all 4 of the speakers. So if you can save your questions and comments until we've heard from all the speakers, that would be much appreciated. Okay, so our first speaker tonight is Dave Chesterfield, who's a local lad from Marsh Lane, Eckington. David, I first heard David speak in 2015, which I think was probably his first public speaking engagement. I think he was a bit nervous. It was a climate rally in 2015, and he spoke eloquently about the changes he's noticed as a gardener that's been affected by climate change. I don't think he realised on that occasion how many times he'd be speaking in public in the coming years. So David went on to be a founder member of Chesterfield Climate Alliance, and then a key figure in the successful campaign against a fracking application by INEOS, who are a global giant chemical company. So David, we're going to start with you if you're ready to tell us your story.
Thank you, Anne. Thanks very much. And
David, I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and after 4 I'm going to ring this bell.
Okay, I was aware of that. Right, so only 5 minutes. We won in the UK, and that's why I want to talk to international speakers. I've been trying to distill the things that made us win. And this is obviously to fit into 5 minutes. I'm going to leave out most of it. But in the UK, there were 3 areas, really, the key ones. Preston New Road in Lancashire, where the industry got in first, drilled a well, fracked it, set off an earthquake, and things got put on hold. This was they rushed in, they got there first, they got drilled. So it was a great, and that's when the anti-fracking movement kind of started. Industry was first. Kirby Misperton up the road in North Yorkshire was very interesting. The well was already there. They applied to frack that well. Small company, I forget their name now. And there was a lot of direct action, which slowed it all down. But there was Helen Chunso and a couple of others who did an amazing campaign of directing information to the minister who had to sign off the fracking application. So you had 2 strands of the campaign there. You had direct action on the ground, which slowed everything down and affected the finances of the company. But you also had this paper campaign of daily emails to the guy in charge, who in the end, they had all the machinery on site. They'd got past all the direct action. They had all the machinery on site. They had everything ready to go. And he didn't sign the piece of paper and they had to pack it up. And the protesters up there were just like, what, really? But I think it was such an important strategy to have the direct action slowed it down, but it didn't stop it, but it gave the paperwork time to win. And so that was brilliant work from Helen there, that she led the keyboard warriors who were victorious there. Then we come to us at Marsh Lane, and we had sister sites, 2 villages nearby, Hatfield and Woodsets. And we had no idea. And then suddenly Ineos turned up and said, put a pin in the map, it's your village, that's where we're drilling. Thankfully, I'd already been to a Chesterfield Climate Alliance meeting which talked about fracking, so I knew what fracking was. And so when the village went, what's happening, we knew what it was. We got in a couple of speakers, and we had the meeting before Ineos had the meeting. So we've packed out 2 village halls. We told the local people in the village what fracking was, why they shouldn't listen to the firm, why it was so dangerous, why it was so polluting, so much traffic. And we got the village behind us. A week later, Ineos turned up in the village hall to say, oh, fracking's very safe. You should, trust us. This is really good for the economy. And we threw them out the village hall. And we rang up the BBC, and we got the news to show these top oil men walking out with their boxes while we were shouting at them. It was a good night and a good start. So we got in quick. That was key. We got the locals on side, and we had our local planning camp. This was our thing, no fracking way. We kind of decided it about the first meeting. Really, really simple and visible. So we got the signs up, and this is something I learned that they did in Australia with a yellow triangle. It's visible. When you do a march, if you don't see the march, it's gone. But if you go around your neighbours and say, put this sign up, no fracking way, it stays there. And so if you went up to Marsh Lane, you'd get 5 or 6 of these in a street. It looked like the whole village, because, you get 5 or 6 down a street and people go, well, it's everywhere. And, we'd put them on lampposts, we'd put things like that. So it gave a thing. We were playing on the them and us. You need a them and us. We all know arguments, but that doesn't work. It's emotions that wins it for you.
1 minute.
So, what? A minute?
1 minute to go, David.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
Giving a few more minutes.
Right. Luckily, I joined the Green Party, and I was a candidate at the general election. So I got to know the Tory MP who was in charge of this. This is personal connections. We won the planning application by getting Tories on our side. I made the fracking farmhouse. You can still find it. It's out there on the YouTube, to give reasoned arguments. But we persuaded the Tories to join us through being reasonable, rational, and winning arguments. And then when it went back to Preston New Road and it set off earthquakes, the Tories were watching, everyone was watching, and we got the moratorium. The earth spoke. They finally got round to fracking, but it was the preparation from lots of direct action, but also lots of talking to politicians and engaging politically, because at the end of the day, it's the politicians that make the decisions. It's not the bulldozer drivers, it's the politicians. And we got politicians to stop because we worked on them, and we did it really well. And we beat the government and the nation's richest man, and they were hell-bent on doing it. And now the whole political climate has changed in this country. I don't think they can get away with it now. As you see, the Isle of Wight's just lost it. I really felt at the time that it was like us against the fossil fuel industry. And if they'd won, they'd have crushed us. We'd be now having trucks everywhere. But we won, and now the big debate is, how do we get to net zero? And so there you go. That's a very personal take on it. I know everyone else has a different way because everyone came and thing, but we pulled lots of people together. We did lots of things. And at the end of the day, we persuaded the politicians to back us. All right?
That's great. Thank you, David. That's a really excellent condensed version. Yeah, but it's
5 minutes flies, doesn't it?
I know, it does when you're enjoying yourself.
Yeah. Oh well.
Yeah, it really demonstrates how important it is to have all those different strands of activity going on to make a successful campaign. Thank you. So our next speaker is from Namibia. We've got Varushka Dumini. Varushka is also supported by Ina Maria Shikongo. And both of them are from Windhoek in Namibia. Apologies if I've not pronounced that right. they're campaigning against Recon Africa, which is a Canadian multinational company who are trying to develop fracking in the Kavango Delta, which is between Namibia and Botswana. So thank you very much, Farushka, for agreeing to speak to us. And I think Ina Maria is going to support you with answering questions later. So over to you.
Thank you, Anne. So where do I start? So in September of 2020, there was an article that came out about Recon Africa. Before that, we had never heard about Recon Africa. We had never heard that there was any company that was interested in developing or extracting oil and gas in Namibia. And so we were all shocked. We later learned that these talks with our government actually date back to 2015. And yet the public was really just kept in the blind about this. Now, it's not, I just wanted to make it clear before I go on further. The company is not drilling in the Kavango Delta. It has an area of 35,000 square kilometers in the Kavango East and Kavango West region. And the Delta was included in that area, but we handed over a petition to the UNESCO board here in Namibia to basically create a buffer zone between Recon Africa's drill site with the Kavango Delta. So of course, what they do in the Kavango River Basin, which is upstream of the Delta, might and definitely will affect the Delta itself, but they are not drilling within the Delta. All right. So initially, the company Recon Africa was very clear that how they wanted to develop this oil and gas drilling was through fracking. They used the words frack simulation. They used the words unconventional play. At the beginning, they were very clear about that. It's when really the public came to question, what is this word fracking? Personally, I had never heard of the word fracking. I know oil drilling, but I've never heard of the word fracking. So we started asking the question of what is fracking, right? So a lot of people started educating themselves. And the more we learned about what fracking is and the potential devastation that it causes, it was an outrage. And here's the reasons why it was an outrage. Firstly, Namibia is an arid and dry climate, right? Water here is already a scarce resource. Now, this company is planning to drill, or really is about to drill in the Kavango region, which is our only forested area, it's the only green area, it's the only area that really gets dependable rain. So water there basically cradles the rest of life, both wildlife and the communities there. And so it was outrageous that the government would allow a company to go to such a sensitive area with such biodiversity and very, very sensitive ecosystems to drill for oil, let alone to use fracking. Now, after the public came out and was outraged about this, the company basically overnight decided to change, that they are no longer doing unconventional, they are no longer doing fracking. They removed the document which basically showed how they were presenting, or their presenters to the investor, which included projections based on fracking. So they removed that document from their website. And so until now, they are still denying that they will be doing any fracking. The government also kind of helps them release press releases which deny that they will be doing fracking. But the point of the matter is their projections until now are still based on a frack simulation method. Our experts say that for them to even determine how much viable of a petroleum reserve there is in the Kavango Basin, they will need to use some sort of frack simulation method, right? Another reason why we are still concerned is that experts say that according to the company's results, it's always underwhelming, by the way. Their results with the test drilling is underwhelming compared to their projections. And so these results basically show that the petroleum is not as much as they think that it is. They keep promising their investors 120 billion barrels of oil, but their results are showing so much less than that. And so our experts are saying, if you want to then maximize the reserve that is there, you can't do that with conventional oil drilling. You will have to use some sort of frack simulation to get the most out of it. And there's also just so many flaws within this company's approaches to the procedures of getting the license, doing it behind the nation's back, basically a business deal between the government and this company and under the table. There have been, social issues that have been raised by the affected communities in the region. This company already has its track record of just being very deceiving, and therefore we don't trust. Even when they say that they're denying fracking, we don't trust that. And so the civil society organizations in Namibia are working to basically lawfully ban fracking in Namibia. That's what we want. We're not only taking the company's word for it, we want it legally banned so that even if Recon Africa by chance leaves, we don't want another company to come and do something similar and approach the government with a frack simulation-based method of resource extraction. So that's what we're currently doing. Now, for the reasons I stated just before, the reasons why fracking absolutely cannot happen, not only in the Kavango region, but in all of Namibia, is because, again, water is an extremely rare resource here. We still have communities that don't have access to clean water. And here we have a company who wants to use underground aquifer fresh water, basically, for their drill simulations. And so that is just outrageous. And then why else? The danger, obviously, we know, I'm sure most of us know the dangers that come with fracking. And so with a country that constantly says we don't have enough money to invest in renewable energy or make a lot of these net zero pledges because we don't have the economy to do that. We also don't have the ability to rehabilitate the environment if fracking does happen and does devastate the environment and affect the communities right there. And basically, if it does affect the community, it's going to intensify the social plights that the community members already face there. Some of them is, for instance, if the company is using clean water, they will come in competition with the local farmers there, right? Who already don't have the equipment to access this clean water in the first place. And then we have the immediate effect of intensifying human-wildlife conflicts there, because again, competition for clean water between animals and the people. And yeah, all of these basically contradict not only the Ministry of Environment's own objectives in regards to environmental welfare, but the government's objectives in regards to climate change, because we have just a few months ago, our environmental commissioner basically pledged that Namibia is pledging for a 92% reduction in greenhouse gases. And this is then very, very contradictory. If you're allowing an oil drilling company to extract oil, you are just as much of a culprit in increasing the carbon emissions as this company is, right? And through rough estimations, we have seen that if the company does extract about 120 billion barrels as they do project, that's equivalent to 51.6 gigatons of carbon dioxide emitted into the atmosphere. And that's about 1/6 of the global carbon budget that is remaining. And by the way, this was months ago, but so that by now, that's even more of the fraction of the global carbon budget. And so there's just so many contradictions. There are so many risks to fracking, not only in the region, but in the entire country itself. So yeah, that's, if anyone has any questions, I'm open to answering the questions, but in short, that's our situation here.
Thank you, Verishka. That's really interesting. We'll save questions till everybody's finished speaking, if that's all right. But thank you so much for telling us about what's happening in Namibia. It's quite striking how in the UK, quite a lot of the arguments against fracking were also centred around water and the potential for water pollution. But I do think in our country, we often take water for granted, having a supply of clean water. Obviously, for you in Namibia, water is really precious, and it's an extra big driver, isn't it, to make sure that fracking doesn't happen in your country. Thank you. Right, we're going to move on to Esteban. Sorry, excuse me. Esteban Servat. Esteban's an anti-fracking activist from Mandora in Argentina, and he's played a huge role in mobilising his community against fracking and organising mass demonstrations. He formed a group called Eco Leagues, which did an amazing job in publicising secret information between the government and global shale gas companies in Argentina. So really looking forward to hearing from you, Esteban.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for inviting me. I think this is a great initiative, and you also have been an inspiration for many of us. Your victories, your success, we've always been following it from Argentina. As Anne was saying, my name is Esteban, I'm a scientist. I come from the Vaca Muerta region. Vaca Muerta is the world's second largest shale gas basin and fourth largest shale oil basin. It's about the size of Belgium. It's on the west of Argentina, and within that region, I was in the province of Mendoza, where many of you may at some point of your life drank some wine from, because it's a famous Malbec wine region. And just like what you were hearing about Namibia, this is also a desert. The area of Vaca Muerta is really a desert where, in the case of Mendoza, 97% of the surface of the province is a desert, and only 3% is under cultivation. So in these conditions, and also it's a highly seismic area. You being in the UK understand that what I'm about to tell you is just insane. In these conditions, the government brings fracking. Fracking, which comes by the hand of your companies. And that's why I celebrate this international solidarity initiative that you have taken, because it's not only the logical step for you, as I imagine now that you have won the fight at home, to go on and reach out and reach your hand internationally, because this fight is won all over the world, because fracking is not only destroying Namibia and Argentina and every other place in the global south, but it's also a major culprit of the climate crisis. So in the case of Argentina, the companies that are the leading companies that are fracking us are BP from England, Wintershall from Germany, Shell from the Netherlands, Equinor from Norway, Total from France, and so on and so forth. Even companies that claim not to frack, such as Austria's biggest company, OMV, they have a page dedicated to why they don't frack, but they are the leading manufacturer of plastics from fracked gas. In a joint venture with Total, they're among the top 10 developers of plastics from fracked gas. So in one way or another, Europe has its hands and its profits coming from the exploitation of the global south. And I agree that your fight is not finished, as you have won it locally until you get BP off of our necks so we can breathe again. And as I was saying, you know, you probably all know here that fracking has been shown to be a leading cause of methane emissions globally. A paper from 2019 from Dr. Howard from Cornell University was a groundbreaking study showing that fracking is estimated to be responsible for more than about half of all increased methane emissions globally from the fossil fuel industry, or more than 1/3 of the total increase when you take into account all sources, including biological ones. So within that context, recently, the most recent paper of the IPCC was calling for urgent methane cuts. And in that context, you have COP happening in the UK right now. And COP is being sponsored by one of the biggest methane emission increases culprits of the world, and the biggest importer of LNG of the UK, which is National Grid. National Grid is sponsoring COP. And guess what's about to happen at COP in Glasgow? The EU and the US are about to launch the recent agreement that they signed called the Global Methane Pledge. A global methane pledge which is aiming and pledging to reduce emissions of methane by 30% by the end of this decade. Well, this is completely impossible when they are the ones leading the expansion of fracking and the gas industries around the world, especially in our countries of the global south, where this comes together with death and intimidation and persecution and exiles and tortures and so forth. In my case, I had to leave my country after we published those reports that Anne was making a reference to, that revealed the contamination of the water tables by the first fracking wells in Mendoza province. This led to mass revolts with tens of thousands of people on the streets. We had demonstrations with more than 15,000 people in small towns. I think these are the biggest demos and actions against fracking in world history. And I bet you nobody in Europe ever heard about it, because we are invisible. Because you have the media, you have the centers of power here. And this is another reason why what you are doing today with this webinar, with this meeting, is so important, because all the power is in the global north. But your companies are killing us and your governments are promoting that in the global south. So we need to build this international solidarity, and coming together is the only way that we can win this fight. And we must not stop until we can defeat it globally. So to make the long story short, because I don't want to take forever, 2 years ago I had to leave because I became the person of Argentina with the highest number of criminal cases against me for fighting fracking. Because as you can imagine, the justice system, just like everything else, is used as a weapon against activists to persecute you, to fabricate criminal cases against us. And then death threats that began to intensify as I was able to turn some of those cases against the government itself. And since then, I've been in Germany for the last 2 years, trying to help build awareness and coalitions, bring the movements together, but build awareness of how is it possible that you have banned fracking here and you're exporting your emissions to the rest of the world. The Paris Agreement, the Global Methane Pledge, and the climate laws, and all the commitments that you are making, your governments are making in Europe, are empty. They are a fraud. And we are furthermore facing the biggest fraud of all, which is that gas is a clean fuel that will somehow help transition to renewable energies, when Dr. Howard has also shown that frack gas is by far the worst fossil fuel of all, with 40 to 60% higher emissions than even coal. So Europe is building LNG terminals everywhere, and we are fighting them. We're coming together with Ende Gelände, Shale Must Fall, Extinction Rebellion, Fridays for Future, and grassroots groups from around the world. We built a global coalition to which I would like to invite all of you, which is called Shale Must Fall, which is a play on word with Shale Must Fall. And it really has a lot of groups from the global south and the global north. And we've been doing actions of international solidarity, connecting the dots of the supply chain and focusing on the multinational climate criminals that are leading this destruction, to tackle them from both sides of the spectrum, the consuming end in Europe and the extraction side of the Americas. And so to not go too long, because I haven't been keeping track of the time, I'm just going to use the last 3 minutes to show you 2 super brief videos. One of them shows one of the actions that we did recently of global solidarity, just a 1-minute trailer. And the other one is a 2-minute video of the most recent action we did with Ende Gelände and Shale Must Fall. The video is of the Ende Gelände action in Germany, but it was part of a global action of international solidarity. And we aim to keep growing these actions into bigger and bigger, and just build a big enough network of global grassroots groups such as yours and ours and Namibia's and the US and so on, where we can have enough power together, because this is, such as Chomsky wrote in a book, is internationalism or extinction. The only way to fight a global threat is not in isolated fights, but all the fights must come together to present a global resistance to a global threat. And so I will briefly share the screen to show you that, and then I can answer any questions. Let's see, tell me if you cannot hear, okay? We are coming together, connecting the global south and the global north. This is what it looks like to fight for 1.5.
Wir Mapuche sagen, dass wir nicht damit einverstanden sind, dass multinationale Unternehmer unsere Ressourcen plündern, wie es seit mehr als 500 Jahren geschieht. Was die multinationalen Unternehmen tun, ist die aktuelle Form des Kolonialismus. Andere nennen es Neokolonialismus. Diese Unternehmer werden die Reichtümer unserer Territorien ausbeuten, die Gewinne mitnehmen und die Umweltverschmutzung zurücklassen.
Fight for climate justice.
Wintershall must fall, Shell must fall, BP must fall, Total must fall. They all must fall because we will have no future if they keep going.
Stop fracking! Nicht in Vaca Muerta und auch nicht on Bo!
We are coming together.
That's one, and I'll just quickly show you the other one that we took to the waters.
We are here in the north of Germany blocking the busiest canal in the world. This canal is a vital trade route of the fossil fuel industry and furthermore of the expanding fracking industry. They're fracking my country, Argentina, killing our people, our children with contamination, devastating indigenous communities from the Mapuche people.
Hier wird Gas als saubere Brückentechnologie verkauft, während dann im globalen Süden Menschen von ihren Ländern vertrieben werden, Ökosysteme zerstört werden und Grundwasser verseucht wird, damit wir hier billiges Gas konsumieren können.
We are here today in international solidarity with peoples from all over the world, including with Argentina, to block this canal together with Ende Gelände.
I'm a member of the Carrizo Comecrudo tribe of Texas. We are Eshtopna, and we're trying to save our homelands from fracking, from pipelines, and from LNG terminals.
Black and brown people, indigenous people all over the planet are crying out for justice. The oil and gas industry must stop its colonization of the world.
The police leader has decided that this demonstration has been dispersed. Leave this area immediately and return to the floor. This is a police order. Your goods will be confiscated by us.
We stand in solidarity with all the Native and Indigenous and people of color all across the world who are fighting these destructive projects. Together, we can have and build a future that we can all believe in.
The open veins of Latin America and the open veins of the global south continue to flow today in the canals of Imperial Europe. And it's time for the climate justice movement to take to these canals to block this colonial fossil fuel extraction and actually have a chance at winning the climate crisis.
Thank you. And the last thing I would like to add that I forgot to mention is that Vaca Muerta is a global methane and carbon that will consume nearly 15% of the, that will consume nearly 15% of the global carbon budget. A similar amount will be consumed by the Kavango Basin that we were just hearing about from Namibia. So if you put those two colonial carbon bombs that are being exploited and will be exploited even more by global North multinational companies from your countries, you can kiss goodbye 1/3 of the entire global carbon budget set in the Paris Agreement to comply with the 1.5-degree target. So it's time for us to put the pressure for governments to put the money where their mouth is. And this is not what's happening in COP, it's the exact opposite. They're sponsored by them. So we count on you, we need your help. And if we can come together, I'm sure we can stop them all. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Esteban. That was great. We couldn't see the picture on the second video, but we could still hear the speeches and get a sense of it. There's some really important messages you've given us there about how we reach out internationally and recognise what's happening in the global south. I think you're absolutely right that the north dominates the world, and we've still got a big fight on our hands. And you're right, we need to be responsible for all our emissions. There's sort of a lot of cover-up going on at the moment. So we'll move, thank you for that. We'll move on to our final speaker. Sligo Molly Wickham couldn't be with us, so we've been joined by her sister Jen. Jen, thank you so much for standing in. We really appreciate it. So Jen is an anti-fracking activist from Wet'suwet'en First Nation, Northwest Canada. Currently, activists are occupying the Geom 10 checkpoint. It's a grassroots resistance to a coastal gas-linked pipeline project for fracked gas. Jen, are you ready to tell us what's happening in your region, please?
Masai, Denise, Takoze, Skyze, Saya Jennifer Wickham, Sydney, Gidim Den Husley, Wet'suwet'en is Den. My name is Jennifer Wickham, and I'm a Gidim Den member of the Wet'suwet'en Nation. We have 5 clans within our nation, and all 5 clans have unanimously passed a law within our Bathlats, which is our feast hall, that all pipelines are banned through our territory. There's been a lot of proposed pipelines. I think at one time there was 14 applications for pipelines to be crossing Wet'suwet'en territory, which is in northwestern British Columbia, in western so-called Canada. All of the pipelines so far have been successfully defeated through loss of investments and resistance and campaigns through public and politicians. It's really nice to hear other folks that have been successful in those campaigns as well. Currently, the Coastal GasLink pipeline is a pipeline that would cross the north of British Columbia. They are currently doing work and have planned to drill underneath our headwaters, which, you know, I hear people talking about the safety of their water, and this is one of the last rivers of pristine drinking water. So we actually drink right out of the river. I know there's not many places in the world where people can do that nowadays. This is one of them. This is one of the last places on the planet where people can drink directly out of the river. And we're working very, very hard to protect that. Last month on September 25th, we had Slato, my sister, and our allies and supporters occupy the drill pad site. Last year, our hereditary chiefs evicted Coastal GasLink. We had a 1-month successful eviction where the territory was completely free of any work and any workers out on the territory. We have an interesting position as Wet'suwet'en people within Canada. In 1997, the Wet'suwet'en and Gitxsan nations had a successful court case in the Supreme Court of Canada, where it was decided that we had never ceded or surrendered or given up our rights and title or jurisdiction over our territory. And that's something that the provincial and federal governments have been working very hard to suppress ever since. So through an FOI, one of the Canadian newspaper companies were able to get access to emails and memos sent through the different departments of the government, trying to formulate a plan on how to suppress that court decision so that they could have free access, unfettered access to the resources in our territory. We know that we're right. We have many campaigns, and what I'm hearing from other folks is, you know, you've been successful on like different fronts and bringing all those things together. So of course we have direct action. We have several camps currently in Wet'suwet'en territory. The Unisdoten, which is another house group, has a $1 million healing center on their territory. They are built in the path of the pipeline. Gidim Den checkpoint was erected 3 years ago in support of Unisdoten. We have another clan, Miksamisu, that is currently blocking a man camp entrance out on the territory. This happened just a couple of days ago. We have our newly formed Coyote camp that is on the drill pad site that is being occupied. Last year, we saw a lot of solidarity actions all across so-called Canada. And there was railways shut down, highways shut down, ports shut down. There was nothing coming in or out of Canada for weeks at a time. It was a really beautiful show of solidarity. During that time, we had been in communication with some folks in the UK that were gonna deliver a petition to KKR, which is one of the main financial investors or owners of the Coastal GasLink pipeline. They're owned by TC Energy, formerly TransCanada. After the Shutdown Canada movement last year, they changed their name. And so we currently have a campaign that is targeting the investors of the project. And the campaign is really focused on the Coastal GasLink pipeline, but also the LNG Canada terminal that they would be sending the fracked gas to condense it and ship it overseas. We've had some successful meetings with some overseas banks that are potentially investors in the project. And so we've been having some success with that. On October 29th, which is coming up, is that next week? October 29th, there's an international day of targeting RBC, which is the Royal Bank of Canada, which is a major investor in fossil fuel extraction, and they're always at the top of the list investing in these extractive projects. I think one of the things that we really focus on is our Indigenous rights. So as Wet'suwet'en people, we have never given up our jurisdiction over our 22,000 square kilometers of territory. That has been proven in the courts. Canada and British Columbia have signed on to UNDRIP and allegedly are implementing it. They have asked for meetings with our hereditary chiefs. They've signed a memorandum of understanding talking about how they're going to talk about our rights and title and how we're going to implement it. But of course, nothing has come of that yet. They are still saying that this does not apply to any projects that were already approved. We are getting emails on a regular basis from Coastal GasLink themselves to try and resolve the current blockades, as they call them. We call them the assertion of our jurisdiction, the reoccupation sites of our territory that we're protecting for our children and our future grandchildren. My sister Slato is a mother of 3. She has been living out on the territory for 8 years in a cabin on a lake that was actually a proposed tailings pond for a mine many years ago. And our nation decided to build a cabin there and occupy that site. So we are quite familiar and comfortable digging in and building homes and living on the territory and getting right directly in the way of these projects. Of course, our hereditary chiefs are taking action in the courts. They're having dialogue with the provincial and federal governments. We are targeting the investors and the contractors. And so far, I think there's, the politicians can stall and delay and politic us and say what they think will appease people. But we're never giving up. We're never going to stop protecting territory and our clean drinking water. We've been doing it for thousands of years, and we're going to continue doing it for forever. I think one of the really important things about what's happening here today is building relationships. And, you know, I would love to see an email of all of the speakers so we can keep in contact with each other when this is over. I think that, you know, we know and we've seen the support and allyship of other Indigenous nations all across so-called North America, and we want to extend that to all of our friends in the global South and all of our friends over in the West. And I think that that's going to really make the difference. There was something else I was going to say, and the criminalization of us. I wrote down one word, I think, Esteban, when you were speaking, you know, having to leave your country. And I can't imagine ever having to leave my territory. I think that, you know, we're genetically tied to this place. And that's something that these oil and gas companies really don't understand. They don't have that connection to the land and to the water and to all of the beings that live and provide for us on our territory. Yeah, we're upholding Wet'suwet'en law, and our laws have been recognized within the Canadian court system. Our system has been recognized within the court system, and it's really a campaign of education. I think that any way that we can amplify each other's voices and really get the information out there is always helpful. We do have a website that I hope folks will be able to check out, iantaaccess.com. I can drop it in the chat on ways to support and ways to amplify. We do have the financial campaigner, the financial investment campaign happening right now. And again, on October 29th will be an International Day Against RBC. So I'm really happy to take any questions from folks. I don't know if I took up the whole 5 minutes. I have so much more to say, but that's a little snapshot of Wet'suwet'en Niinta, Masai.
Thank you, Jen. That's really powerful. I think you're right about the strength of all these campaigns comes from people's love of their home and their place and their belonging there. That's absolutely right. You know, for Esteban, having to leave his home country is heartbreaking. Your description of your campaign is really interesting as well, how you're using so many different facets of campaigning. It's very striking when you talked about the Canada shutdown. I didn't hear anything about that in the UK. I don't know if other people had heard of it. Sounds like a massive, you know, a massive impactful campaign, and yet we didn't hear about it. We're going to sort of open up for questions now. I've jotted down a few things as people have been speaking, because we want to sort of take some actions forward from this. All of you as speakers have mentioned doing that, so I'll try and summarise some of the things that we've talked about at the end of the meeting. But I think, you know, your idea of being in touch by email is a really useful one. So I'm going to suggest that we open up for questions now. I'm just going to remind people that this is being recorded, so if you don't want your video of your question to be recorded, can you jot something in the chat? If you can keep your question or contribution to about a minute at the most in length. I know people probably have a lot to say. And if you want your question to be addressed to a particular speaker, do say so. You can use this little hand icon somewhere can't even see mine now. I think it's somewhere. We got that on here. If you're able to use the icon to raise your hand if you want to ask a question, please do that.
Anne, can you hear me? It's Richard Pointer.
Pardon?
Anne, it's Richard Pointer.
Hi.
Can I just say a few words, please?
Yes, you're very welcome.
One thing I never hear said in all the talks is people never seem to have a definitive answer as to where all this came from. I'm sure some people do know, but I think if you're going to fight this, you need to know your enemy from the roots upwards, so to speak. So I just wanted, for those that might not know, this primarily came about as something that Hillary Clinton initiated, and it started off as the Global Shale Gas Initiative, and it was basically just a program for promoting fracking. It was announced in April of 2010 by David Goldwyn, the State Department Special Envoy for Energy Affairs. And basically, Hillary Clinton then went on a massive international tour of all the countries that they thought might be interested. Firstly, so they could sell their technology and expertise and any associated goods like slick water, the fracking fluid, and also then to help promote the liquid gas terminals that they would then be exporting to, and then for shipping it all around the world. But the initial group of companies that she visited, including the UK, were China, India, Jordan, Morocco, Poland, Namibia, Pakistan, Chile, Bulgaria, Estonia, Argentina, Indonesia, Ukraine, Romania, Peru, South Africa, Lithuania, Armenia, Georgia. Now, primarily, they want to also disenfranchise the Russian fuel supplies. So it was a two-pronged attack, if you want. They wanted other countries to develop the shale, them supply the shale themselves, but at the same time, reduce people's reliance on Russian gas. So when they came to all these countries, it was a multi-pronged affair. You know, up to 13 different agencies were involved at any one time. They were really infiltrating governments. But the thing is, this all started back in 2010, and it really only started to appear on the radar of people like ourselves and the residents in 2015 and 16. And by this time, they'd had a good 5 or 6 years to get all the mechanisms in place, to have all the answers and all the slick responses to say how good it was going to be for everybody. And unfortunately, that's where we found ourselves on the receiving end of that. So I just thought that might be useful for people to then go and do a bit of research themselves, just to have a look at that situation and how we came to be this way.
Thank you, Richard. That's helpful background. Yeah, something I wasn't aware of. Anybody else with any questions for our speakers? Go, Lisa.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, thank you. Brilliant speakers. Thanks to all three of them. Just a very general question to all of them, which is just what, you know, it's horrifying hearing your stories. It's just, what is the best thing that we can do as UK, you know, based campaigners? What's the most helpful thing that we can do to help your campaigns?
I think that's that's a good question to address to each of them in turn. Esteban, you put your hand up.
Sure, unless Ina or Verushka want to go first. But I can go at least as far as our side. As far as our side is concerned, you know, getting your company to leave Vaca Muerta, focusing all the energy you can on campaigning for VP to get the hell of Vaca Muerta, out of Vaca Muerta. Because if you can do that, then we can get all the other multinationals out sooner or later. By the way, there's an article on The Guardian that revealed a year ago that your government was misdirecting £1 billion that were meant to finance green energies. They were misdirecting that to subsidize fracking in Argentina. So The things where you can take direct action now, and you could, by blocking infrastructure, by lobbying, by sending letters, whatever means you have available are very, very important. And besides that, joining the global fight that we are putting together as a global international solidarity coalition with Shale Must Fall, the actions that we try to do every so often so that it becomes more impactful, more powerful, and sharing everything you can from those actions so that we can amplify those voices. And I'm sure Ina and Ferushka can speak for Okavango, but obviously putting pressure on Recon Africa. Canada is part of the Commonwealth, and Recon Africa has an office in London, so it also has a connection with you guys.
Ina or Verushka, would you like to answer Lisa's question?
Yeah, I think Esteban made a very, very valid point. It's just holding global North companies accountable. I would also like to add on that a lot of these companies are backed by investors. That's really the backbone of some of these fossil fuel companies. So also just highlighting the responsibilities of investors, sort of playing a role in these destructive activities, but not being, highlighted as the culprit of these activities as well. So we know for sure that Recon Africa has investors from Canada, America, but really all over the global north. So yeah, I would also like to highlight that the investors have a huge part in play, a role to activities, and they should also be held accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the most powerful ways to try and undermine the industry, isn't it? To try and target the investors. Jen, have you got anything to add to Lisa's question?
Yeah, I think that everyone has said really great things, and we definitely have all of that information for the investors as well as contractors. Contractors won't apply to you guys over there in the UK. But certainly the investors would, and we have all that listed on our website that I did drop in the chat, iantoaccess.com, and just being aware of all of the actions that we're taking and the campaigns that we're currently doing. We do have an email sign up on our website on our main page. When you go to iantoaccess.com, just scroll down past the videos. And there's a sign up there for email lists. And so we will do regular updates. Yeah, I think building relationships and solidarity internationally and learning from each other, I think that's one of the most important things. We recently in Canada, and I don't even like calling it Canada. It's not a country, it's a corporation. There was a Mi'kmaq group, another Indigenous group over on the East Coast that was successful in shutting down an Alton gas project. So that was another fracking project that was recently defeated, and they have to decommission the site. And it was a lot of years that Indigenous, mostly women, were on the front line, getting arrested, being criminalized for protecting their territory, and they were successful in shutting down that project. And so I think that, everybody being aware of these things and supporting each other and amplifying the voices of everybody, and doing what we can. If you're overseas and all you can do is write an email, then that really helps. I think the petition, and I'm really struggling, it feels so long ago now, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were actually, myself and my house chief Was and the war chief from Tyndonega, which is one of the communities that shut down the railways, in support of us. There was 4 of us that were going to be flying to the UK and hand delivering this petition that folks put together to the KKR office in London. And we were going to be doing like a little tour, and we have a 18-minute documentary that you can find on YouTube as well called Invasion. that talks about some of our fight. And I messaged somebody at the beginning of March, and I was like, you know, let's see what happens with this COVID thing. Like maybe we just hang off for a minute. And then I think it was like the next week the global pandemic was declared. And so we didn't actually get to make it over there, but I know that there are folks over in the UK that are really supportive and delivered that petition for us. And they said that all the names on the petition, if they read them out, would have taken like a week of somebody like reading out the names one at a time. And so it was significant to us that, you know, there was such a large group of folks that were supporting us from over in the UK. We did have some international coverage. So I think I forgot to mention at the beginning that I am also the media coordinator for Giddimden Checkpoint. And so there were folks covering it in the UK. I'm sure it wasn't like first page or front page news over there, but it was a really big deal. You know, the ports and the rails and the highways being shut down in Canada, all in solidarity. And it was right before the pandemic. So of course, the Wet'suwet'en shut down Canada, and then COVID shut down the world. So we got one up there, but yeah, I think I answered.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Paul, you've got your hand up.
Sure. I wonder whether the word fracking will ever be used in Glasgow. I fear that this fracking concern of ours is quite a minority sport in the global picture. So I would seriously wonder whether we shouldn't send a message from this group today to Alok Sharma to say, fracking is important, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good point, Paul. Yeah, something we should think about, sending a group letter. Are you offering to write it for us?
I will write it if you wish.
Fantastic. I like a volunteer.
Okay.
It would have some clout as well, wouldn't it? An international letter.
Can you add, do you want to add a screenshot of all the faces?
All right. I can't do that.
Can anyone do that? Maybe Greg can do that. James, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I mean, I'd first just like to say thank you so much to all our speakers who've spoken. I think this has been a fantastically powerful session, really, to hear at first hand. We know these stories, but to hear them at first hand from people in the global south and at the front line of these existential battles, really, for communities to survive against the power of global oil and gas is so inspiring. And I mean, we're just where we come from, we're just a small little town in a place called Derbyshire. Most people in England don't even know where we exist, let alone around the world. We're not a huge, big community. But as David outlined, we had important battles here where our communities fought off the frackers very successfully in an inspiring way. And I think that's given us a connection to these struggles. And really, just in terms of what we can do, I think there's lots we can do. And we can't promise huge amounts, but I think we can say this, that in 10 days' time, on November the 6th, when people are on the streets around the world, demanding climate justice from COP, demanding the sort of action from COP that Esteban quite rightly says we don't think will come from COP, but putting that demand really, really strongly. When we're on the streets of our small town, Chesterfield, we'll be taking the message that you guys have brought to us and the examples that you put forward onto the streets. And Esteban talked about shale must fall. And the campaigning against oil and gas and shale will be one of our key themes when we're out on the streets of our town in 10 days' time. We'll be focusing on the campaign against oil. We've got fantastic events taking place. And one of the things we hope to be doing, literally with Shale Must Fall, is to pull down a shale rig. We have got a a fracking rig. It's not an actual fracking rig, but it's a fracking rig that was made by anti-fracking campaigners as a sort of prop during our anti-fracking campaign, during the height of the anti-fracking campaigns 3 or 4 years ago that David was talking about. And we're going to assemble that in our market square of our town. And at the end of our rally, we're going to symbolically pull it down. We won't be actually destroying Shale, but we're making a symbolic gesture to say that we are in favour of pulling down Shale and the power of global oil and gas. And in doing so, standing in solidarity with the struggles that you guys have described today. And it's a small amount we can do, but we hope we can do that in an effective way.
Thank you, James. Yeah, I mean, we are a small town, but at the same time, I think we're part of a network now, aren't we, of within the UK of anti-fracking communities, and we've got some reach across our own country where we can sort of spread some of the information about these campaigns. I'm going to go to Esteban and then Lisa next. Esteban.
Thank you, and kind of bringing together what Paul was saying as well, that why they don't mention fracking at COP. Well, I think it's the same reason that no politician in Europe wants to mention fracking at all when talking about gas as a future technology and as a clean fuel and transition and so on. And that's precisely why we can use it, because it's something so undeniably criminal, so undeniably bad, that it's political suicide for any politician in Europe to espouse and defend fracking. And yet, that's exactly what they're bringing in the form of LNG. So that, conversely, what that means to us is that we have a formidable weapon in the narrative to bring down this fraud that gas is a clean fuel for the future. And this is the last battle of our time in terms of energy. Everyone knows coal is bad. Everyone knows that oil must be left behind, but gas is the battleground where all the multinationals and governments are trying to play this greenwashing narrative manipulation. And that's why National Grid is sponsoring COP. But so using the fracking precedents, just like that's another reason why our friends in Ireland were pretty successful in getting the government to make a commitment to ban the import of frack gas, even though it was afterwards betrayed, as you know, probably. It was betrayed, but it had become an official government policy by the coalition with the Greens last year. Then they betrayed them, but it doesn't matter, because what I mean is building upon local experiences of success like yours, we can build a global solidarity train that can finish the job and say, we have the upper hand morally to say, why are you doing it overseas? You know, not here, not anywhere. If you have banned it here, there's no argument you can use to protect, to defend it from doing it abroad, importing that here. So I think we must emphasize fracking, and fracking is the weakest part of the fossil fuel industry. So if in terms, it's not weak economically and in other terms, but it's weak rhetorically, communicationally, is indefensible. And so we can bring it down, and because it's a major source of methane, and methane is the topic of our time, if we focusing on fracking, we can poke a hole in the fossil fuel system, and through that, we can begin making greater victories against the fossil fuel industry globally.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Lisa.
Hi, thanks, Anne. Yeah, just another question to all three speakers. I was just wondering about the level of public support in their countries, because that was quite a major factor in the, in the tide turning against fracking in the UK. Originally the politicians all jumped on it, thinking this is great for jobs and the economy. But as all the campaigners turned the public mood against fracking, the politicians gradually fell into line until they were fairly isolated. So I was just wondering, is that the same? Are the public generally against fracking in your own countries, or is it just the multinationals have got such a stranglehold on your governments?
Who'd like to answer that first? Jen, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, has tried to sell LNG as like the transition fossil fuel. I think that a lot of the general public know better. It's certainly a focus in campaigning is giving that education to folks. And I think the real threat in so-called Canada is the Indigenous people. So the Wet'suwet'en have never signed a treaty. We've never surrendered or ceded our territory. We've never given up jurisdiction or our rights and title. But there are nations that have signed treaties, and Canada is breaking those treaties. And so, the spirit and the intent of those treaties was for those nations like the Mi'kmaq that recently defeated Alton Gas, and other nations that we're allied with, was for them to be working together. And we know that that isn't happening. So Canada is full of broken promises, and the solidarity that we saw last year and in 2019 really showed governments and corporations like how strong Indigenous people can be when we're united. And so on one hand, I think that there is like a growing awareness of how detrimental fracking is and how much is at risk. There's really, economic benefit at this point. It really doesn't even come into question for a lot of folks. And I think that the real issue and the real threat to the development of gas and I would even argue the economy, is Indigenous sovereignty and respecting Indigenous rights. It's following UNDRIP, getting free, prior, and informed consent from the people, and they don't have that. So I think that is maybe a stronger position and a stronger question right now in so-called Canada is respecting Indigenous sovereignty. I'm not sure how news has traveled over in the UK around the finding of mass graves at former residential schools for Indigenous people. And, it has been really clear to us since forever that they want us dead so that they can have access to the quote unquote resources in our territories. And that hasn't changed. And so, years ago when Prime Minister Harper gave an apology for sending Indigenous children to residential schools to quote unquote kill the Indian and the child, nothing's changed since then. And nothing has changed since first contact and colonization started. And nothing has changed today. They still want us out of the way. They want to put us in jail. They want to criminalize us. They want to have free access to our territories. And that's the real issue that we're trying to address here.
It's very stark message, that, isn't it? You're fighting for your homes and your community and your own people. It doesn't get more desperate than that. Farishka, did you have your hand up? Were you going to answer Lisa's question?
Yes. Just as Jennifer sort of very well highlighted, a lot of the times it's just the lack of education that a lot of local people don't have in regards to fracking. Like I said, I've never heard of the word fracking until Recon Africa suggested for a drilling permit. And so in terms of the local support, once people got to know and still get to know what fracking is and what it entails, how much water it will use, the kind of environmental damage that it causes, a lot of people are clearly against it. But the company Recon Africa, as well as the government, have done a good job at really capitalizing off of the lack of education. So they would tell the local communities that, hey, we are here, we're bringing up our dual sites, and this is what you're going to benefit. We're going to create employment. We're going to give you food packages. We're going to drill 2-3 boreholes for you. But we're not going to tell you what fracking is. We're not going to tell you what it entails. We're not going to tell you how much water would be needed. We're not going to earthquake-like symptoms every now and then. We're not going to tell you any of that. And so, yeah, in regards to the oil drilling, it's a little bit more complex because some people are for it, some people are against it. But with fracking, oftentimes when a person learns what fracking is, once you empower them with the knowledge of what it is, then they look at you and say, no, we cannot do that here. Absolutely not. It will affect our elephants. It will affect, and like I said, human-wildlife conflicts will intensify. Absolutely not. So, yeah.
I'd love to live somewhere where I could say that's going to affect our elephants.
They do that here, absolutely. Perhaps not the locals in the communities because the relationship with the elephants is a little bit more tense, right? But here we can say, hey, our elephants here are really sensitive to a lot of these seismic activities in the earth already. So we can't imagine what fracking will do. And then I think I don't know if it was Lisa who also asked again what the international community can do to support some of the movements in our fights here. And one of them is, I think Jennifer also just highlighted them, which is building international solidarity. A lot of the times we have the will to, for instance, go to our government and push for a ban for fracking, but we don't know the know-how, the steps to doing it. We don't know the technicalities of doing it. We don't know how much power we have as citizens to even demand for something like that, right? Yeah. And so it's also just that international support that a lot of, I guess, environmental organizations are actually coming up with these days. And also just, Esteban also pointed out this, it's that if an activity is banned in the global north country, I don't think it should stop there, right? You should look at how are the vulnerable countries affected by these same activities and how can we support them in any way that we can. And this should come from a leadership level, so yeah. I just wanted to add to that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not enough, is it, to say we've won the fight in our country? It's an international issue. It affects all of us.
Exactly. Yeah, here we have a saying, it's like, it's not enough to clean up your backyard. Yes. You should also assist your neighbor, yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to go to Esteban and then Jeannie.
Yeah, on the question that Lisa asked about the public opinion, well, in Vaca Muerta covers several provinces, and the one I was in was the last one where fracking moved in. And the other provinces that are part of Vaca Muerta, they have a tradition of oil and gas extraction. And that's their main industry. So the resistance there was much less, except for the Mapuche people, the indigenous people whose lands are being devastated by this. And they put up a fierce resistance from the beginning, from 2012, 2013, when fracking first arrived, which was heavily repressed and persecuted, and they are being displaced and paying the highest cost of all of this. And then when fracking moved into our province in Mendoza, it's a different situation. This was at the end of 2017, and Mendoza has a different industry. It's not an oil province. It's a province of wine, agriculture, beautiful landscapes, and tourism. It has the highest peak in the Americas, so a lot of climbing, and so people are really not into oil and gas, and they don't see job creation promises from any of that. So, and they defend water. So it was, it was possible to get the biggest part of the society on our side pretty quickly, especially as we could really demonstrate the contamination and the government was lying. So that was not so difficult. Then at a national level, Vaca Muerta has been sold as the saving grace of the Argentinian economy, which is devastated by many crises and the pandemic and the right-wing governments. So it's difficult because people are really ill-informed. If they believe the media, they think Vaca Muerta is the future. But anyone who is informed even a little bit understands that fracking is bad, and there's a lot of people that are supporting us and who are against fracking.
That's good to hear. Jeannie?
Yeah, just to echo the sentiments, it's such an exciting meeting to be at. One of the questions I have is really, thanks to Jennifer for telling us about Shut Down Canada, which really I have read about. It really is one of the most exciting stories in our movement, I think, because it brought together the Indigenous peoples in Canada, the anti-racist people in Canada, the trade union movement in Canada, and built a coalition that was so effective. And I suppose my question really is to Esteban and Venushka. Is there any sign of working class, of organized working class in trade unions in your countries getting involved in the anti-fracking movement? We still have a battle to win here. Some of our major trade unions only recently, still passing motions at their conference, concerned about jobs and about the impact on jobs if we try to decarbonize our economy quickly. And so I just wonder whether there's any response to that question, whether Canada can spread, because Canada was such a good lesson.
Shall I go or Verushka?
You can go first, Esteban.
Well, trade unions are the key, I think, not only to that, but to the entire climate fight. It's complicated. In Argentina, we got a bunch of trade unions to join. Yes, we did. And I was trying to work heavily on building a coalition as broad as possible, including not only trade unions, but the churches, the faith groups. We even got to the Pope. So I had no limits in terms of trying to bring people together in that sense. But at the same time, trade unions in Argentina, at least, they're very pragmatic. They're very focused on their own interests for survival. So unless you can see that they are affected by the operations of fracking, it's really tough to get them involved because they're already fighting so many other battle fronts, right? So we had some trade unions joining, like the winemaking trade unions and the teachers unions and many others. But the powerful ones were not yet joining because they were involved in the fracking operations, such as the truck drivers union. That one can paralyze the entire economy of the country. They're extremely powerful, but unfortunately, there's a lot of truck drivers working in Vaca Muerta. So in fact, the government sometimes even plays that against the people. Sometimes they have used some of the truck driver unions to repress people at demonstrations so the government can wash their hands and say, well, it wasn't us. It's just different sectors of society fighting one another, and they just remove the police. So they let the repression take place, or the intimidation. So it's a really complex issue, but I think over time, trade unions will join more and more because it will be more evident that the destruction is irreversible.
Yeah, it's quite
sorry.
Yeah, it's quite similar here, Esteban. It's either that unions are quiet about it, sort of reserving their comments on it, or they do support you, but in a way that is not so clear. It's almost like they don't want to reveal that they do support you. Here, the ones that are really leading the anti-fracking movement here is just environmental organizations and civil society servants. The government is, they are helping Recon Africa emphasize that there is no fracking, but they never spoke up against fracking to begin with, right? So we can't really rely on the government. But I have not, to my knowledge, I don't know any trade union that is really, or that has spoken up in solidarity with us.
Okay.
Ina Maria, you had your hand up.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm just going to add on to what everyone was saying and just add on what I think is quite important. We don't really speak about reparations. I think it is a very important subject because it's like Jennifer was saying, they are out there to kill us so they can have our earth. And something that has been bothering me recently is, why does the global north only talk about the Nazi genocide, the Nazi genocide, you know? Countries, when they came to invade our lands, they committed genocides, but we never speak about those genocides, you know? Colonialism came with its own genocide. I mean, look at what happens in Belgium, what happens in Namibia, what happened in South America. And those countries were never held accountable for the genocide that they caused on our lands. And today this trend is still continuing through development. It's still the same trend of you indigenous people, you don't know what you want. You need gas, you need oil, so you can supply us again. I mean, come on, I'm here now in the UK, and this country was literally built up because of colonialism. Where would the UK be if they had not colonized all of those countries? I mean, the UK was backing the apartheid regime in South Africa, backing the murder of my father, for example. So we need reparations, and it is not by now saying, no, but we need gas, we need the LNG, you need development. Stop saying that. We need accountability for what they did to us in the first place. And all of this development is actually a continuation of those trends. So if we demand for reparations, at least it will be a beginning. Even now with the COP, they need to tell us, why is it that they only recognize the German genocide that was done towards the Jewish people in Germany? Is it because they are white? Is it because they're white? Because we monkeys, we don't matter. They can continue coming into our countries so they can finish us off, so they can have our resources, so they can continue building their wealth, not even realizing that in their own countries, the people are also suffering today. So nowadays, it is not anymore about the colonial powers. Today, it is about the colonial corporations. I mean, we saw your countries burning. We saw your countries being flooded. And yet your leaders are still willing to risk your lives as ordinary citizens, because even you don't matter. So it is this trend of colonialism that needs to be stopped, because these corporations are basically following the same trends that the colonial masters used to, and they are being backed by governments. You know, they are killing us activists off so they can continue this, but they don't even care about you yourselves as citizens. So how do we as a global nation really start holding these companies accountable? For example, when they have the oil spills, who cleans up the oil spills? They don't clean up the oil spills. Have they ever been held accountable for not cleaning up those oil spills? No. So we need accountability on every single level. Stop running to the UN. Why does the UN even entertain these companies when they say, "Oh, we need help for you to clear, for you to help us clean up these oil spills"? Why does the United Nations even entertain that? They must clean up the oil spills, because once they start paying for the damage that they cause, maybe they'll wake up and say, okay, maybe it is time for us to transit. But the fact that they were never held accountable gives them a reason to continue what they're doing. And when we talk about accountability, it is not only in terms of clean up the oil, but also start compensating the communities that your people were exterminating over 500 years ago already. We are talking about cultural genocides here. We are talking about people that were treated as monkeys. I mean, our ancestors' skulls were taken to Germany so they can be examined to see if they are real humans, you know? I mean, I am a human, but back then we were not seen as human. So indigenous people globally, they are under threat. Me, when I look at the gas and oil industry, I see a war against indigenous knowledge. That is what I see. And it is backed by a system that has never been held accountable for anything. They will even today in Canada, they're saying, no, but we did not kill the children. No, we did not want to exterminate your race. What do you mean? We know that you did it. We know, I mean, today we can find the bones. Maybe we should start doing the same here in Namibia. Start digging around the residential schools to see what was done. I mean, Windhoek is full of bones, thanks to the Germans. Now we are talking about reparations, but the communities are not even involved. It is our corrupt government that is kind of leading the talks. And that corrupt government does not even give a damn about the soldiers that were fighting during the liberation struggle. So if they don't even care about the fellow soldiers and the children that died in exile, who are the Herero people? To a Novambo government, which is basically the majority, I mean the leading tribe. So we need accountability on every single level. That is what we need. We need reparations. And this is a very important subject that needs to be pushed. So not only from the colonial masters, but also from those companies. You know, Mafikile was shot down. Ken Sarabiwa was killed. Esteban is living in exile. Me, I'm receiving death threats. When is this going to stop? Why is it that we, as indigenous people or people from our lands, don't have the rights to our lands? Why is it that corporations have got more rights? We need to hold them accountable. Thank you.
You're absolutely right, Ina Maria. It's underpinned by colonialism. Thank you for reminding us of that really uncomfortable truth, but we do need to hear it and we need to keep it in our minds. I suppose it's money, isn't it? It's money and massive companies that are behind, you know, even the governments. That's what drives everything.
Richard Pointer's got his hand up.
Richard, sorry.
About that, just had difficulty unmuting. Yeah, that was quite powerful from Ina Maria. It's a stark reminder how privileged we are in the UK and other Western countries that we are afforded some protection, and we kind of bellyache at the moment about our rights being eroded by changes to our own legislation, which is starting to impact on our own peaceful protests. In some respects, we are going backwards, but I would dread to think that we would ever go as far backwards as some of the countries that are still basically experiencing things from the European division of the Africas and the South Americas, where they basically all went there to get the spoils, to rape the countries of all the mineral rights. And it just seems like those dark days are still there in those countries. So yeah, it's a stark reminder, and it's difficult to call. The subject I was actually going to say was, without dismissing what's just been said, was that our own country, our ministers and the companies themselves that come to do the fracking will always emotionally blackmail us with fuel shortages as being one of the things that are likely consequences of us not allowing them to go ahead. And I just really wanted to say that because we were dealing with INEOS, plastics were always at the forefront of our minds. And because Coca-Cola by their own admission, produce 100 billion disposable PET plastic bottles a year, and still are not able to use recycled plastics to the amount that they say they would do. I think it's still less than 10%, and they're not going to achieve 30% by 2030. So it's worth reminding people that while other companies choose to use virgin plastics in preference to recycled plastics, then you only have to go walk around any supermarket to see how many goods are still packaged in plastic and what a huge impact it will have in the future. Because, you know, companies are going to be striving to, the whole food chains are going to be striving to carry on using plastics. That's the sad reality of it all. So, you know, we have to push with the food manufacturers as well, and the plastics manufacturers, that they stop producing rubbish, as we would call it, with the plastic. You know, you think about the Christmas crackers that we get, you know, people who celebrate Christmas and buy Christmas crackers full of plastic trinkets that ultimately go into landfill. If it's such a valuable commodity, why don't they save it and preserve it for those things that is absolutely necessary for, and not just waste it like they waste everything else when it's so easily won? Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Esteban, I'll go to you, and then I think we need to start wrapping things up, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you. Quick follow-up to what Richard was just saying, because it's super important. Plastics, and the connection between fracking and plastics, it's huge. The plastics boom of the world owes its existence to the fracking boom of the world. The availability and abundance of ethane that is being fracked is allowing the expansion of plastics production everywhere. The US has multiplied its production, and a recent paper from last week revealed that the contamination, the carbon footprint of US plastics is to exceed the footprint of coal emissions. Okay, so this gives us, and it's not much difference from here, from Ineos, another huge plastic manufacturer from ethane, from frack gas, or as I was telling you, OMV from Austria, or so many others. So that also gives us another angle of the narrative from which we can tackle fracking and the fossil fuel industry, because it's a huge part of it that even people that don't know what fracking is, they are all against plastics.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, yeah, plastics is a hot topic, isn't it? It's something people are really cottoning onto. The need to reduce plastic use, and that's a good angle. So I'm going to just run through some of the points that have been made in terms of actions we can take forward, just as we start to wrap things up. First of all, Verushka reminded us that we need to campaign together to ban fracking. It's not just each country individually. And Esteban, who doesn't mince his words, has said we need to get BP off. We need to get BP off your necks. We need to really target the companies that are driving fracking in the UK. BP is one of the main ones, and it's about campaigning, targeting investors in these companies. Something that goes on anyway, but it brings it into sharp focus when we hear from people directly affected by these companies. We need to continue to campaign for the UK to be responsible for all our emissions, and not those that are sort of coming at the back door. You know, countries that are producing gas or products under the banner of the UK, but we're not accountable for that at the moment, and that's something that we need to be legislating for. Esteban, you reminded us of the Shale Must Fall campaign, so that's an international campaign. So we're suggesting that we all join that campaign, and it's a way to work together. Jen, you've talked about us having email contact, so following this meeting, if we try and set up sort of email Google group. It's a way to sort of build solidarity and power as a campaign and share information. Yeah, we've said about holding global companies responsible, highlighting the role of investors. Jen, you've said we need to join your campaigns and be aware of what's happening in other countries, try and keep abreast. Like I say, I'm horrified that I didn't hear about the Shut Down Canada campaign, and I should have known about that. I think we've all got a responsibility to build our own awareness of what's happening in other countries. Paul, you're going to draft a group letter from us all to Alex Sharma, highlighting the real threat of fracking and that needs to be part of COP discussion. Esteban, focus on the connection between plastics and fracking. We need to really build that connection when we're campaigning about plastics. And then finally from Ina Maria, it's so important to keep talking about climate justice, to keep building our awareness of the history of genocide, and the importance of reparations and accountability for what's happening in other countries. Is there anything that I've missed that people picked up on as, actions that we can take from this meeting? David. David, were you waving at me?
Oh, there you go. Yes, I was. I was just having trouble unmuting. I spoke first and very upbeat, trying to get things going. Thank you so much to the other contributors. I think the thing amongst all the other practical things is we have to have hope, and we have to communicate. And listening to you guys and girls firsthand is giving us the stories that we can tell other people. And it's so important when we're either on a stage talking to hopefully a massive crowd on the 6th of November, or just in our workplace or our colleagues and our families, to say, we've met these people, what's happening in Namibia, what's happening in Argentina. It's in deserts. They're fracking in deserts with fresh water. And I think Esteban was absolutely right that fracking is the weak spot in the monster that is the oil and gas industry. And it's like, it's where we can hit them. It was when they came to our village, I knew we'd win. I knew we'd win because fracking, once you expose it, it doesn't stand up. It makes no sense economically, environmentally, but not making sense has never stopped the monster of colonialism and capitalism. It's, this greedy machine. But if we keep our hope and we keep sharing our stories, we keep in touch with each other, we get the emails out there, then at least we've got the stories to tell that we'll use to get in at the fracking. And I just wanted to thank you for teaching me loads of stuff and telling me the stories, and I'm going to take it out there and tell anyone who will shut up long enough to listen to me. So thank you.
Thank you, David. That's a really good way to end the discussion. Yeah, that's how I feel. Okay, so before everybody disappears, Greg was offering to try and do a screenshot of everybody. You want to try and do that, Greg?
Yeah, I can do. Just hang on a second. Yeah, I think we can do it. I'll do it on the gallery view, and then everyone can fit on one screen. So I might take a couple of screenshots. But just as a solidarity for everyone here, that I will take this and take a couple of screenshots. So it's kind of like taking a picture. Like I kind of want to say smile. Like, yeah, everyone pose.
Oh, yeah, do you? Yeah.
So yeah, excellent. There you go. There's one. Yeah, and then I'll do one more.
Wonder how many Greg Hewitts you'll have on this.
Yeah, there we go. There's yeah. Okay, I've got a couple of pictures. So thanks everyone for that.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, thank you. It's been a fantastic, enlightening and emotional discussion tonight. We've really learned some stuff. It's been fantastic to hear from you. Jen, thank you. Esteban, amazing. Barushka and Nina Maria, thank you so much for joining us. And David, thank you for finishing off with a message of hope. That's just what we needed. And thank you to Greg, James and Steph for pulling this together. I know it was really hard work. You've done an amazing job. Lisa, did you just want to say something? Oh, I thought I saw a little hand go on there.
No, I was clapping.
Okay. Yeah, all right then. Let's all have a clap to finish off with.